I got a night shift job at a highway construction site near Elkhart, Texas, around September last year. The site is over 20 miles from the nearest town, surrounded by a dense forest the locals call the never-ending woods. Trees grow so close together that as soon as the floodlights from the site hit the tree line, the darkness swallows the light whole. At night, the silence out there feels heavier than any sound. I'd just been fired from my old job and needed something quick. When they offered me the night shift with decent pay, I didn't hesitate. The foreman barely asked any questions. The job was simple. Show up on time, do your work, don't bother anyone. Perfect for someone like me. The first week went by pretty quiet. Only about 5 or 6 of us on the night crew doing small tasks, mostly prepping materials for the day shift. Everyone was quiet, or maybe just too tired to talk. We worked under bright floodlights, but beyond that was a wall of pitch-black darkness. Then on the 8th night, around 2 a.m., I was sent to check the fuel on the main generator, located behind a temporary shed. I had my flashlight and was walking over when I noticed something odd next to the generator, an old dusty leather-bound journal sitting right on the ground. It looked like it had been there for a long time, but was still intact. I picked it up and flipped through the first few pages. It was a handwritten journal from about 2 years ago. The handwriting started out neat but got shakier and more erratic. The further in I went, the author signed it as Ryan C., another night shift worker who had been assigned to the same site. I should have just left it there. But I didn't. And I wish I had. That night, after my shift, I sat in my truck and read the journal under the dome light. At first, it was just some ramblings from a guy working nights, bored, tired, and lonely. But then the tone changed. One entry said, "I saw light in the woods. Thought it was a ranger, but it moved way too fast and disappeared. I'm the only one who saw it." Another, "Last night I heard someone whisper my name, not over the radio. Not one of the guys, just heard it, whispered, and 3 nights in a row now. The light's back, further away. Something's watching me. I can feel it. I have to sleep with my flashlight on now. I think it knows." I wanted to laugh it off, thinking the guy was just losing it. But the next night, things started happening to me. At first, it was small stuff. One time I was walking along the north fence and caught a glimpse of a faint flickering light deep in the woods. Not a flashlight, but some kind of soft glow. I stared for a moment before it vanished. The next night, while fueling the backup generator, I heard whispering behind me. I spun around. Nothing. Checked the radio. No static, no voices. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to be the guy everyone thought was crazy. But the nights kept getting worse. I kept catching movement out of the corner of my eye, but when I turned, nothing was there. I started noticing these strange silences, like the crickets and bugs suddenly stopped chirping altogether. One night, I even heard strange noises, branches snapping softly just outside the fence. Then came the night I actually saw someone dart past. I was heading behind the generator to grab a fuel hose I'd left there. Just as I rounded the corner, I froze. There was a figure, a shadow of a person, standing right at the edge of the woods, just outside the site. The yellow floodlights barely reached him, but I could see enough to make my skin crawl. He was tall and thin, wearing ragged, hanging clothes. His skin was pale, almost grayish. I couldn't tell if he had eyes, but I swear he was staring right at me. He stood there motionless. No sound. My heart pounded like crazy. Then from the darkness I heard a whisper, soft but clear, calling my name. I dropped the fuel hose and ran like hell. I didn't go home that morning. I sat in my truck at a gas station until dawn. As soon as the clock hit 7 a.m., I called the site office and quit. No explanation, no notice. I didn't even collect my last paycheck. I just wanted out. A few days later, one of the other night workers texted me. He said he recognized the name Ryan from the journal. Apparently, Ryan was real, but no one knew where he'd gone. One day he just stopped showing up, and nobody bothered to ask why. And the journal? It's still in my truck's glove compartment. I haven't burned it or thrown it away. but I haven't opened it since that night. Sometimes, when I'm alone, in the dark I still hear the whisper, soft, patient, calling my name from somewhere I can't see. And part of me wonders if whatever it was ever really left. I used to work construction night shifts back in 2019 out in rural Pennsylvania. The job paid well, double pay for the night hours and bonuses for completing certain tasks before morning. But there's a reason most people avoid night shifts, on big construction sites, especially when they're remote. This story is why I don't work nights anymore. I was part of a crew building a massive distribution center in a wooded area just off a 2-lane highway. During the day, it looked like any other project. Concrete, cranes, mud everywhere. But at night, the entire place felt like it was on a different planet. It wasn't just the quiet. It was the way sound carried in the open space, the way machines looked like skeletons in the dark, and the way your flashlight never seemed to reach far enough. There were 6 of us on the night crew, including a guy named Mike. He was in his late 30s, funny in a dark kind of way, and he'd worked construction for most of his life. We didn't hang out off-site, but he was the type of guy you'd want nearby if anything went wrong. One night in early November, our supervisor asked us to stay late, past the usual 3 a.m. cutoff, because a crane part was delayed and we needed to finish setting foundation beams before the rain came. Around 2:30 a.m., Mike and I were in the northeast section, placing rebar. It was cold and silent, except for the occasional clink of metal or radio chatter. The others were spread out across the site, mostly unloading materials. That's when we heard the scream. It wasn't a panicked shout or someone yelling instructions. It was a short, high-pitched scream, full of fear, and then suddenly cut off. Mike and I both froze. I called out over the radio, "Anyone hear that?" Someone answered, "Heard something. Where are you guys?" Before I could respond, Mike grabbed his flashlight and jogged toward where the sound had come from. Near the edge of the retaining wall we'd started building 2 days earlier. I followed. We found our coworker, Darren, lying face down in the gravel. His hard hat was about 10 feet away. His arm was twisted unnaturally behind his back, and there was blood pooling under his head. He wasn't moving. Mike knelt beside him and checked for a pulse. "Shit, he's gone," he said quietly. It looked like Darren had fallen from the top of the retaining wall, about 20 feet up. But here's the thing. There was no ladder, no scaffold, no reason for him to be up there in the first place. It wasn't part of his assigned area that night. We called the foreman, who showed up along with emergency services an hour later. The coroner ruled it an accidental fall. Everyone accepted it. Everyone except Mike. For the next few nights, Mike was different. He stayed quiet, didn't joke, didn't take smoke breaks with us. I caught him more than once staring at the retaining wall like it was calling to him. On the 4th night after Darren's death, Mike told me something that made my stomach twist. "I was dreaming," he said, "but it didn't feel like a dream. I saw Darren. He was standing right at the edge of the wall, same way we found him. He turned around, and his face, it wasn't right, like it had been peeled off. He didn't say anything, just pointed at me. I laughed nervously, hoping he was joking. He wasn't. That night we were tasked with pouring concrete in a new section near the back of the property. It was colder than usual, and fog had settled low across the ground. Visibility was awful, even with floodlights. Around 3 a.m., we took a break in the trailer. I sat with a coffee and Mike stepped out to take a call. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When I stepped outside to look for him, I noticed something wrong immediately. His hard hat was lying on the ground. I called out his name. Nothing. I walked toward the edge of the lot, where the retaining wall curved around the back. That's when I saw him. Mike was standing right on the top edge of the wall, not moving, just standing there, arms at his sides, looking out into the trees. I yelled, "Mike, get down from there, man, that's not funny." No response. I ran toward him. The closer I got, the more wrong everything felt. The air felt heavy, like pressure was pushing down on me. I climbed up the side using a temporary scaffold and reached the top. Mike was gone. I looked down. No sign of him on the ground. I shouted his name again, turning in circles. That's when I noticed something in the dirt. Bare footprints, same as with Darren. No boots, no socks, just long human footprints, leading away from where Mike had been standing. And they weren't going down the wall. They were heading into it. The next morning, search teams looked for Mike. Nothing. The site was closed for 2 days, but they never found his body. I quit the night crew the day after that. Before I left, I spoke with one of the older contractors who'd been working that site for years, even before this latest project. I asked if he'd ever heard of anything weird out there. He hesitated before answering. There was an accident back in 1982, he said. Small crew doing early land prep. 3 guys went missing. One turned up 2 weeks later. Said he'd been following voices into the woods and couldn't find his way back. He told me the land had been used for mining a century ago. Lots of deaths, no official records. I don't know what happened to Darren or Mike, not really, but I still think about that dream Mike had. Darren standing on the wall, pointing at him. Some people say construction sites are dangerous because of the machinery, the heights, the pressure, but I think sometimes it's the ground itself that wants something, and when you dig too deep, you wake it up. I've been working in construction for almost a decade. I've seen all sorts of things: dangerous machinery failures, unexpected structural problems, and all kinds of difficult weather conditions. But nothing ever prepared me for the kind of fear I experienced that night. It was something beyond the normal worries of the job, something that felt almost supernatural. This happened about 2 years ago. I was assigned the night shift at a massive construction site on the outskirts of Dallas. They were building a commercial high-rise, a huge project that seemed to go on forever. Most days, the site was buzzing with activity, but at night, the place turned into a dark, silent maze of steel beams, scaffolding, and unfinished walls. The night shift was supposed to be simple. I was to patrol the basement area and check on equipment, making sure everything was secure. The basement was a vast space filled with pipes, wires, and unfinished concrete walls. It was like a labyrinth underground. That night, I arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The temperature dropped sharply, and a cold wind swept through the open areas. I tightened my jacket, switched on my helmet light and my trusty flashlight, and began my rounds. The first hour passed without incident. I walked through the wide corridors, my footsteps echoing loudly. The beam of my flashlight pierced the darkness ahead, bouncing off the steel scaffolding and concrete surfaces. I felt a bit uneasy, but I chalked it up to the darkness and my own tiredness. Then, around midnight, things started to feel different. As I reached the far end of the basement, the flashlight began to flicker. At first it was just a brief dimming, then a quick, irregular strobe. I stopped and tapped it gently, thinking maybe the batteries were low, but that didn't help. The light flickered again, then went out completely. I was plunged into near total darkness. The helmet light was weak, barely enough to outline my immediate surroundings. I pulled out a spare flashlight from my pocket and turned it on. The beam was steady, but as I looked around, I noticed something odd. The air felt heavier. The silence was too complete, almost suffocating. Suddenly, I heard a faint noise to my left. A soft, dragging sound, like something scraping against the concrete floor. My heart skipped a beat. I pointed the flashlight toward the noise but saw nothing, just shadows and pipes. I told myself it was probably a rat or some debris falling, but then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. A shadow slipped behind a pillar, quick and silent. My pulse quickened. I called out, "Hello," Is someone there? But there was no answer. The basement was so large, and at night it could be a dangerous place. Trespassers, thieves, or vandals sometimes tried to sneak in, but nobody was supposed to be here. I decided to move forward cautiously, shining the light ahead. The deeper I went, the darker it got, and the noises grew louder. Whispers, footsteps, scraping sounds. At one point, the flashlight flickered again, then died. I fumbled in the dark, trying to switch on my backup light, but my hands were shaking. Then, I saw him. At the far end of the room, standing perfectly still by a concrete wall, was a tall figure wearing a hard hat and a dirty work jacket. The flashlight beam caught the man's silhouette, but his face was hidden in shadows. I stepped closer, calling out again. "Hey, are you okay?" No response. I shone the flashlight directly at him. The man slowly turned his head. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes were dark, hollow, with no expression. Fear rooted me to the spot. It was like staring at something not quite human. The man took a step forward, and the floor creaked beneath his boots. I wanted to run, but my legs felt frozen. I managed to say, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Still no answer. I fumbled for my phone to call for help, but there was no signal in the basement. The feeling of isolation hit me hard. Then, suddenly, the man vanished. 1 second he was there, the next nothing but empty space and shadows. I spun around, shining my flashlight. Wildly, "Hello?" I shouted, my voice cracking, but there was no reply, only silence. I started walking back toward the stairs, my heart pounding. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I stopped, turned, but saw nothing. The footsteps grew louder, following me closely. I began to run, desperate to reach the exit. When I finally got to the stairwell, the door was locked. I tried to open it, pulling hard, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in. I banged on the door, shouting for help, but the silence was deafening. The cold crept in, wrapping around me like a shroud. I looked around desperately and noticed a narrow ventilation shaft nearby. Without thinking, I crawled into it, my flashlight barely illuminating the cramped space. I moved forward slowly, the metal scraping against my clothes. After what felt like an eternity, I emerged into a small maintenance room with a door leading outside. I burst out into the cold night air, gasping. The sky was clear, stars twinkling peacefully, as if nothing had happened. Back at the site office, I told my manager what I'd experienced. He listened, nodded quietly, and said, "Night shifts are tough. You're probably just stressed." But I knew better. That figure wasn't human. I requested to switch to day shifts after that night. I don't know what that man was, or why he appeared to me, but sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still feel his presence, watching, waiting,